Plate 6. Trade and spices. Bringing spices home to Spain was one of the main reasons for the trip. You remember, spices were very, very much in demand, because without spices everything tastes boring. Of course, the sailors didn't expect that they would simply receive spices as a gift or harvest them themselves. That's why, at the very beginning of the journey, they had loaded up a lot of goods that they wanted to exchange, you could also say trade, for spices. You have certainly heard of trade before. What does it mean exactly? Trade. Trade means that you give something to someone and receive something in return. The exchanged items, called goods, have a certain value. If someone gives you a present, one does not speak of trade. Because then he expects nothing from you, except perhaps a thank you. In trade there are goods for goods, that is exchange of goods, or money for goods as you know it from shopping. Services, for example, cutting hair, repairing computers or teaching students, also have a value and can therefore be exchanged for other services, goods or money. In any case, in trade you always want to give away as little as possible and get as much as possible. After all, you usually don't pay a higher than the demanded price. If you take larger amounts, you often get a discount. Compare for instance a small versus a big bag of potatoes. The big bag costs more overall, but a single potato in the big bag costs less than one in the small bag. Not only do people trade with each other, but countries do too. Countries today have many trade relations with other countries. If your country wants to buy something from abroad, it is called an import. If your country sells something there, it is called an export. Some goods are only found in a few countries. Nutmegs, for example, or valuable metals, or natural gas. The fewer countries that can offer such a commodity, the higher the price they can ask for. Imagine the following situation. You desperately want a nutmeg. There is only one trader who offers nutmegs and he knows he is the only one. This trader can charge insanely high prices. Someone who observes this may then grow nutmegs himself and sell them at a similarly high price. This second trader becomes a competitor to the first trader. Both traders are competing for you as a customer. You will only buy your nutmeg from one of them. Usually from the one who charges less. The price charged by the first trader therefore often influences the price charged by the second trader. If a third and fourth and fifth nutmeg seller appear, they influence each other's price. Their total supply of nutmegs is increasing. In order to be able to sell them at all to you and many other people who did not necessarily want a nutmeg, but should be convinced to buy one, the price must be low. If the price is a bargain, many will grab it. That is how traders get rid of their nutmegs. You can see from this that supply, available nutmegs, and demand, sought after nutmegs, and price are interdependent. It was only because the number and locations of spice traders increased over time that prices decreased to that ordinary people were able to afford spices from the 19th century onwards. Spices. On the Spice Islands, there were and are many other spices besides nutmeg. But not all spices come from far away, some also grow in our regions. Some are native, some have been introduced later on. But what are spices, actually? Spices are dried parts of plants that have an intense typical smell and taste. You use them in food, not to still hunger, but to give food a certain taste. You would never eat a plate full of cinnamon or chili powder, would you? The spice is usually not distributed throughout a plant, but concentrated in a certain part. Depending on the spice, it can be found primarily in leaves or the flowers or the bark or the root. This particular part of the plant will finally be harvested. Spices not only taste good, but have another very practical property: they are effective against bacteria and mold. One advantage is that hardly anything can spoil when drying or storing spices and respective plant parts. As a weapon against bacteria, spices are used in mouthwash, mint or eucalyptus, for example. Let's take a closer look at 3 spice plants: pepper, vanilla, and cinnamon. All 3 are among the oldest spices in the world and were already used 4,000 years ago. Apart from that, the 3 have little in common. People who only use ground spices from the shaker sometimes don't know which part of the plant a spice comes from. Even people with sharp eyes and a magnifying glass cannot tell whether the powder contains roots or leaves. Sharp eyes are also of little help in telling ground spices apart. Trust your nose so that mint doesn't accidentally end up on your pizza instead of basil. Pepper. The pepper plant, Piper nigrum, is a shrub whose fruits are peppercorns. There are varieties with white, black, smooth or shriveled tiny peppercorns. They can vary in spiciness. In any case, many peppercorns, about 50, grow close together, in one fruit. They hold together without an additional coating. In terms of structure, you can imagine the fruit of the pepper plant as a grape with many berries, but in miniature. Pepper can be bought ground today or as peppercorns that you rub fresh in a pepper mill. Be careful not to get any crumbs on your fingers, because if you touch your eyes or nose, it can burn like hell. Vanilla. The vanilla plant, Vanilla planifolia, contains the second most expensive spice of all. Only saffron is more expensive. Like all orchids, the vanilla plant is beautiful, to look at and to feel, and a real climber. It clings to any tree as a scaffold and wins its way up in a zigzag pattern. It cannot slip, because short curls, called aerial roots, keep growing out of its stem to hold on to. Vanilla plants have thick and fleshy stems and leaves that can store water well. The vanilla plant is even more beautiful when it flowers. It then produces long yellow flowers. The flowers later become fruits. The shape and size of these fruits are like the handle of your school bag. These fruits, called vanilla pods, contain the actual spice. It takes a lot of effort to extract the spice. The green fresh pods must first be doused with hot water and stored in an airtight container for several weeks until they turn black. When dried and ground, the vanilla flavor emerges. It is wiser to store vanilla as pods, not as powder. The general rule for all spices is that they lose their smell and flavor more quickly when ground than unground. Today, vanilla is grown in large plantations with thousands of plants. How are they propagated? Theoretically, you could put the seeds in the vanilla pods in the soil and wait a long, long time for them to grow into vanilla plants. But it is much easier and also works if you want to propagate your balcony plants. Cut short stems including leaves from a strong plant here and there and put them in soil. New roots form at the bottom of the stems. Many new plants grow from a single strong plant. Vanilla plants like humid warm climates, tropical climates. It does not grow here, only in the tropical house in botanical gardens. Vanilla sold in our shops almost always comes from Madagascar. This is the name of the largest island in the Indian Ocean, on the southeast coast of Africa. Magellan's crew never went there. A detour would have meant at least 4,000 kilometers diversions. Note, islands where spices grow are not automatically called Spice Island. Cinnamon. Now to the third spice plant, cinnamon, Cinnamomum verum. Cinnamon needs a tropical climate. It grows almost exclusively in Asia, especially in Indonesia. The Spice Islands are part of this. The cinnamon plant is an evergreen tree. It keeps its leaves throughout the year. In the field, cinnamon is grown as shrubs, about as tall as an adult. Like other shrubs, they have branches and leaves. Cinnamon bushes would hardly stand out in a hedge in front of the school or in the garden. The spice is in the thumb-thick branches, or more precisely in their inner bark. This means that for harvesting, the outer bark must first be scraped off, similar to peeling asparagus. Underneath lies the inner bark. If you cut off a thin layer of it, it will curl up. You can see how it curls up on a cinnamon stick, you'll get one in a moment. The fact that cinnamon comes from the bark has two advantages. Firstly, bark contains very little water, so it is easy to dry. Secondly, shrubs and trees have bark all year round. Unlike vanilla or pepper, which only bear fruit once a year, cinnamon can be harvested at any time.